Hello and welcome again. In this lesson, I want to show you how to add a search feature to the Bookstore application. What we want to be able to do basically is to add some values to our request query and use them as filters when fetching the books. For example, I want to fetch books from the database, but I just want books um, whose category is fiction. So I want to be able to do something like this, and category equals fiction. And when I hit send, I want it to show me only the books with fiction as their category. I also want to be able to do and author equals someone's name, or for example, let's say John Smith, and uh, maximum purchase counts equals 12. You get the point. So I just want to have fields from which I can filter the data that is going to be returned by the API. So to do that, we're going to head back to VS Code, and luckily we have our folder structure cleaned out. So we just need to go to our book controllers.js to implement this. So I'm going to um, uncollapse all of the functions I have here. So our concern is with the fetch books, which is this function that is running whenever we send a get request to slash books, as you can see here. So our concern is with this function, and what we want is to be able to um, before we fetch all books, we want to check request.query for filters, and if they are filters, we want to use them in model.find query. Okay, so what we want to do is this. So let's send this, let's first log the request query objects to the console, and let's see how it looks like. So I'm just going to say console.log request.query. I'm going to save this, and I'm going to repeat what I did the other time, and category equals fiction. Of course, you will know that once I add a question mark to my URL, whatever comes afterward is treated as the request query, or rather the query parameters in that request. So I'm going to check if my server is started. Just a few seconds more. All right, so my app is started. So let's go to Postman and send this request. And let's check the console for what is printed. So you can see I have an object. Category is fiction. Let's add more items to the request query. And author is John Smith. Let's send this again. As you can see, now I have two items in the request query. So I can keep chaining up the query parameters on, and I will keep having this object with key value pairs. So now what we want to do is take all of these objects and insert it into uh, into this model.find query. So we want it to look like this. For example, let me paste this here. um, something like this. And let's try this and see what result we get. So this is what we want to be able to do without hard coding it. We want to have the items in the request query being passed into the model dot find query. So let me send these requests. Okay, my server is still loading up. All right, so let's head over to Postman again and send these requests, and let's see what it sends back to us. Great, now we can see that the only books returned are the books with category fiction and author John Smith, as you can see. So we want to be able to implement something like this in our GET request here to ensure that the user can search using the request query parameters. So what we will do is to create an object and name it as a variable. So I would first say let query be equal to, oh no, let's not name it query so that it does not get confusing. Let's name it conditions equals to this empty object right here. So what we want to do is check the request query. Remember that we're searching or we're filtering using the category and author fields. So what we want to do is check request query for category and author. So um, I'm going to take this out of here. And so I would say if request.query dot category, then conditions dot category equals requests dot query dot category. So let me console.log conditions here, and then I'll explain what I'm trying to do again. So let's hold on for the server to start. Okay, great. Now let me send this again. Now here you can see that my conditions object is updated because there is a category in the request query. So what I have written here is to check if there is a category in the request query. I want to put uh, this category key and this value, that is the value of request.query.category, inside of this object. Okay, and the same thing I will do for the author. I would say if there's an author in the request query, then conditions dot author equals request dot query dot author. I'm going to save this and then let's see what is printed again. All right, so let's see. Now you can see I have a semblance of the request query in this new object called conditions. Now you may ask, why not just pass in the request query instead of creating this new object here? So let's see how that would play out. Let's just use request.query here and let's search. So I'm going to log conditions. I'm also going to log the request query. So let's try that out. Okay. Now I'm going to send this request. Yes, and now it returns category as fiction and all of this, right? Now, this will work until I add a value that is non-existent. Say, for example, and cost equals 0. And now we have an empty array because this value specified here does not even exist in the schema at all. And in real sense, it should not even matter in the requests, uh, in the search parameters, because it does not exist. So that's the reason I'm removing the fields we need exactly. Category equals fiction and author equals John Smith and cost out of the whole request query object. However, you could also just use the request query straight up, but that would mean that you have no control over what the user is sending and what response the user gets from that. So I would recommend you use this method by specifying what you expect the user to send, and by that you determine what the user should see. So having done this, if you check the console, I have this as the category, as the conditions rather, and this as the request query. So you can see that no matter what is sent in the request query, the conditions object remains how I defined it. So now I can just say book.find and then pass in here conditions, and that should solve it. Let me take this off, and then let me save this, and let's send the request again now. And now you can see I have some results because it only picks the category and author fields, which is it expects to be in the documents. All right. So, and you would also notice that if there are no um, values in request query, conditions automatically becomes an empty object, which also works fine with the query. So, this is a mini search feature that we have added to our bookstore application. We can expand it. You can check for a maximum um, purchase count. You can check for a minimum purchase count. You can play around with it, and let's see how far that goes. Lastly, I want to um, show you a shorter way to do this. Book.create, and instead of having to write out all of this, because this is fine because we have only just about 7 to 8 key value pairs. Now imagine if we had up to 50 and with different data types and expectations from the front end, that would be quite burdensome to do. So you can use what is called the spread operator in JavaScript, and the syntax is just like this. If you have an object, um, let's just say A, B, C, and you want to spread this object, you just say, okay, let me name this a variable. Let's x equals ABC, and you can just retrieve all of the elements in x by saying dot 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 x, and that will spread out all of the elements in the x object. So to do that here, instead of having to type in title, request body the title, and all of that and all of that, you can just say spread out the request body, and that will be dot 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 request dot body. And that will match every value in request dot body that has a value in the schema. And you don't need to write out everything one after the other. So I'm going to save this and let's try out a post request again. And title is latest bookie of fiction, category others, color blue, and let me send this request. And you see it just picks off all of the values that are in the object and matches them with the um, keys in the book schema. So I hope you've been able to at this point follow through with using Mongoose in your project and naming your files and folders and exporting your functions and all of that. So um, I'll see you in another lesson. Thank you.